You keep pushing because stopping feels like losing. You tell yourself that holding on is faith, that arguing is passion, that resistance means you care. But deep down, you are tired, not physically, spiritually. Tired of carrying answers you were never meant to figure out. Tired of replaying the same prayers with different words, hoping control will somehow turn into peace. The mind keeps fighting because it thinks surrender will erase you. It whispers that letting go means giving up your voice, your dreams, your worth, so you hold tighter, you reason harder, you defend yourself even in silence, and the noise inside you grows louder. This is where most people get stuck, not because they lack belief, but because belief feels safer when it stays theoretical. Real trust costs something. It costs certainty. The brain hates uncertainty. It craves predictability because predictability feels like survival. So when life stops making sense, the instinct is to argue, to demand clarity before obedience, to ask for proof before peace. That instinct is human. It is wired into you. But what once protected you is now limiting you. Every time you resist, the weight increases, not because God is punishing you, but because you are fighting the current instead of flowing with it. Stress rises. Anxiety tightens its grip. Your spirit feels heavy because it is being pulled in two directions at once. One part of you wants alignment. The other wants control. That split drains your energy. It clouds your discernment. It keeps you restless even when nothing around you is moving. There is a quiet truth most people avoid. Arguing feels active, but it is a form of delay. It gives the illusion of progress while keeping you exactly where you are. The ego loves debate because debate keeps it in charge. It stays relevant. It stays loud. But growth begins the moment you stop feeding that noise. Not with force, with honesty, with the admission that maybe the fight itself is the problem. When you finally pause, something strange happens. The pressure eases just enough for you to breathe. You realize you do not have to understand everything to move forward. You do not have to feel ready to be guided. Readiness is not a feeling. It is a decision. And decisions change the direction of a life faster than emotions ever could. This is where surrender starts to shift from terrifying to relieving. Not all at once, gradually, like setting down a bag you forgot you were carrying. The moment you stop insisting on your own timing, your nervous system begins to calm. The body responds before the mind does. Shoulders relax, thoughts slow. You begin to sense that peace was never hiding in answers. It was waiting in trust. Letting go does not erase your strength. It refines it. You stop trying to bend the path to your will and start learning how to walk it with awareness. You listen more. You react less. The need to defend yourself softens because you are no longer trying to prove anything. You are learning to receive direction instead of demanding explanations. This shift changes how you see obstacles. They stop feeling like personal attacks and start looking like invitations to grow. You still feel fear, but fear no longer leads. It follows. You still have doubts, but they no longer decide. Something deeper takes their place, a steady knowing that you are not alone in this process, that guidance does not always arrive as clarity, but it always arrives as enough. The urgency here is real, because the longer you argue, the longer you delay becoming who you are meant to be, not a better version, a truer one. Every moment spent resisting is a moment spent disconnected from the peace you are searching for. You do not need more effort, you need alignment. And alignment begins the moment you stop fighting the hand that is trying to lead you forward. The moment you stop arguing, the world begins to feel different, not because it has changed, but because you have. Your perception shifts. You notice details you ignored. Opportunities appear that felt invisible before. Life starts speaking to you in quiet ways, in moments that almost seem accidental. But nothing is accidental. The shift inside you draws what you need when you are ready. Control no longer feels necessary. Trust becomes magnetic. You realize that the battle you fought with God was never about proving yourself. It was about discovering who you truly are beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the fear that kept you clinging to certainty. You begin to see the patterns in your life, the same struggles, the same setbacks, the same frustrations. They were not punishments. They were mirrors reflecting the parts of you that still resisted. And now, without resistance, the mirror shows something else: potential, strength, a quiet power that was always there but buried under doubt. Every argument you let go of peels back a layer of fear. Every demand you stop making opens space for guidance to arrive. You are no longer fighting the current. You are learning to navigate it. And navigation requires listening, not force. Observation, not insistence. Faith, not argument. Your thoughts, once a storm, begin to organize themselves. Decisions that felt impossible now feel clear. The mental clutter that exhausted you dissipates because your mind no longer has to defend every desire, every expectation, every imagined betrayal. You are free to act from intention rather than reaction. And this freedom is addictive, not the kind of fleeting pleasure that fades, but a deep, enduring clarity that transforms every choice you make. You start noticing how small acts of surrender compound into massive shifts. The relationships you thought were fixed begin to heal. Opportunities you thought you missed reappear, sometimes in ways that surprise you. Life starts responding to the calm you have cultivated inside. The urgency of this realization cannot be overstated. Every moment spent in argument, in resistance, in negotiation with what cannot be controlled steals from the life that is waiting for you. Every second you cling to doubt delays the growth that is already knocking at your door. Growth does not demand perfection, but it demands release. It asks for courage to step into uncertainty, and courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is silent. Sometimes it is simply choosing not to fight when your instincts scream to fight. That is the threshold. That is the turning point where spiritual evolution accelerates. You are no longer defined by what you resist, but by how you respond. When you finally stop resisting, you begin to feel a different kind of strength, one that is not forged in struggle or debate, but in acceptance and alignment. The fear that, NCE controlled your decisions diminishes. You realize that safety was never about avoiding risk, but about trusting guidance greater than your own reasoning. You still have questions, you still have doubts, but the energy you once spent arguing is now spent observing, listening, and moving. And movement, even uncertain, is progress. Every action aligned with this understanding reinforces it. Every choice becomes a declaration that you no longer need to prove your worth. You simply live it. And with living comes transformation. You notice patience emerging where impatience once ruled. Calm replaces chaos. Clarity replaces confusion. Your perspective stretches beyond the narrow limits imposed by fear and ego. You begin to see that true growth was never about the battles you fought, but about the ones you finally chose to lay down. Surrender does not diminish you, it defines you. It opens channels that argument could never reach. It tunes you into rhythms that were always present but inaudible over the noise of resistance. You begin to move in sync with a larger plan, one that does not demand your understanding, only your openness. And in that openness, you discover the profound power of simply letting go. Once you step fully into surrender, the weight of life shifts in ways you could not have imagined. The chaos that once seemed permanent begins to lose its power over you. You notice the moments you thought were mistakes were actually invitations, doors opening in directions you never expected. Your mind, once frantic with arguments and demands, becomes a tool instead of a cage. Thoughts no longer dominate you. They serve you. The constant tension in your chest eases because you are no longer trying to force the world to fit your understanding. Every moment of resistance you release creates space for insight, for clarity, for guidance to enter without friction. You begin to see that control was never the path to peace, it was the obstacle. This is where true transformation begins. You start noticing how life responds when you stop trying to argue your way through it. Challenges no longer feel like punishments, but like signposts directing you to growth. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every delay becomes preparation. You realize the energy you once wasted on fighting is now fueling your vision, your purpose, your inner strength. The patterns that trapped you in frustration start to dissolve. You see that what you labeled as injustice, failure, or disappointment was often just life reshaping itself to align with your awakening. And the awakening is relentless because it knows no compromise. The urgency here is undeniable. You cannot afford to cling to old habits of resistance. Every moment you continue arguing, every demand you make for things to happen on your timeline is a moment lost. The peace you seek, the growth you crave, waits on the other side of release, and say requires courage, the kind that doesn't roar but whispers and persists, the kind that steps forward even when clarity has not yet arrived, the kind that trusts without proof, acts without guarantee, and chooses alignment over control. This is not easy, it is not convenient, it is not comfortable, but it is necessary, and it is unstoppable once you commit to it. As you embrace this shift, your perception of fear changes. Fear no longer dictates your decisions. It becomes a guide, a signal, a quiet reminder of where growth is possible. Doubt no longer paralyzes. It challenges you to look deeper, to see beyond the immediate, to trust in what cannot yet be seen. The strength you gain is not external. It does not rely on outcomes or validation. It is born internally, in the spaces where you once resisted and now choose to flow. Every choice aligned with this surrender magnifies your clarity. Every act of obedience to the higher rhythm strengthens your resolve. You begin to operate from a place of power that argument could never give you, a power rooted in understanding, not insistence, in trust, not proof. Life begins to move differently. The noise that once consumed your thoughts quiets, and in the silence you hear guidance you ignored before. The opportunities you missed appear again, but in forms that test your faith, not your control. The relationships you struggled to fix begin to shift because you have shifted first. Your presence itself changes the energy around you. People, circumstances, even time respond to this new alignment. You are no longer reacting to life, you are co-creating it. And this is where growth accelerates, where spiritual evolution stops being the theoretical and starts being lived. The stakes could not be higher. The longer you cling to resistance, the more time you waste disconnected from your true path. Growth is not a reward for arguing well. It is not earned by proving yourself right. It is accessed by letting go, by stepping into the unknown with trust as your only companion, by choosing alignment over certainty, courage over comfort, action over complaint. And once you do, everything changes. The peace that seemed distant becomes immediate. The strength you thought you lacked reveals itself in every decision. The clarity you craved emerges, not as a gift, but as a reflection of the surrender you finally embraced. This is the quiet power of obedience. This is the shift that transforms a life from struggle into flow, from doubt into certainty, from resistance into unstoppable growth. The moment you fully surrender, you begin to understand the depth of what you were missing. Life stops feeling like a battle. The constant tension, the restless energy, the endless need to control every outcome, all of it begins to dissolve. You realized that peace was never something you had to find outside yourself. It was waiting in the spaces you refused to enter, in the silence behind your arguments, in the trust you resisted giving. Every struggle you endured was a preparation, every setback a lesson, every unanswered question a nudge toward alignment. You begin to see that growth was never about winning debates with life or with God. It was about letting go of the fight that kept you from becoming who you were meant to be. Your awareness deepens. You start noticing the subtle ways the world responds to your inner state. Our mind is no longer a battlefield. Clarity emerges. Decisions that once felt heavy now feel light, guided by something you cannot fully explain but recognize as truth. Fear no longer dictates your steps. Doubt no longer immobilizes you. You are no longer waiting for permission or proof. You move because you have already aligned yourself with a force greater than your understanding. Each action becomes purposeful, each choice intentional, each moment a step toward the life that once seemed unreachable. The urgency of this realization grows with every passing day. Time spent resisting is time lost. Every argument you hold on to steals energy that could be used for growth, for creation, for living fully. The longer you cling to control, the more opportunities slip past unnoticed. The peace you crave, the clarity you yearn for, the spiritual power waiting within you, it cannot be postponed. It is available only in the release, only in the surrender, only in the decision to stop fighting and start flowing. The path forward is not easier because it demands obedience, not because it removes challenges. It is relentless, and it asks for courage that goes beyond comfort, beyond understanding, beyond what feels safe. As you embrace this path, strength manifests in unexpected ways. It is not loud, not brash, not dependent on recognition. It is quiet, steady, unstoppable. It comes from a mind unburdened by resistance, from a heart unshackled by doubt. You begin to operate from a place of profound inner power, the kind that cannot be shaken by circumstances. You move through life with intention rather than reaction. Every choice aligns with a deeper rhythm, a subtle guidance that was always present but hidden beneath the noise of argument. The transformation is not sudden. It is steady, cumulative, undeniable. You are becoming a force shaped not by struggle, but by trust, not by insistence, but by alignment, not by ego, but by awareness. The stakes cannot be overstated. Each moment spent resisting delays the growth that is waiting for you. Every second spent arguing postpones the clarity, the peace, the spiritual depth that is accessible only through release. Growth does not require perfection. It requires surrender. It requires a willingness to trust without proof, to act without guarantee, to step forward even when the path is invisible. This is where true power lies, not in control, not in winning, not in proving yourself right, but in the quiet, persistent choice to let go. That choice reshapes everything. It rewrites your story, transforms your perception, and opens doors that argument and resistance could never reach. In this space, life begins to unfold in ways that feel miraculous but are simply natural. The burdens that weighed you down lighten. Relationships respond to your presence rather than your demands. Opportunities appear where there once were obstacles. You begin to move with the flow of a larger plan, no longer fighting, no longer questioning, simply participating. And in that participation, you discover the profound power of alignment. You realize that spiritual growth is not earned through struggle, but accessed through surrender. It is not a reward for argument, but a gift for obedience. You step forward with clarity, with purpose, with trust, and in doing so, you become unstoppable, unshakable, fully alive.